the old transfer portal mess. Had a buddy from Round Rock, Texas today asking me about this. Boy, they love us in Round Rock. I've said it once, I've said it a million times. So the transfer portal, it is indeed a mess. I'm not going to push back on that. We told you that we expected a second wave of transfers coming. It is now happening. I even think that in the future, the majority of the transfers could end up happening after spring, because that's really when you learn where you stand on that year's version of your current team. And so here we go now. We're out of spring and we're going into the summer months. You cannot take 2 hours break right now. I can't even take a 2-hour lunch, because when we get back and we refresh 247sports.com front page, 5 different guys have entered the transfer portal. And it's a crazy time right now. One of many reasons why I tell you there is no off season. Doesn't exist, especially this time of year. Well, what do you think is going to happen after this? All of a sudden, what's going to happen after this is then you're going to have a recruiting surge, kind of already happening. I mean, we got camps all over the place this weekend. We got camps going on in a time of year where you're not used to them happening. And that's partly because of the way the calendar's structured now. And it's also partly because COVID had kind of pushed everything to where when things finally open back up, you really got to make hay. But I want to reiterate 2 things before I dive into what I want to talk about here. And that's my stance on this. Told you what I feel about the transfer portal. I think it's a misconception out there right now that a majority of the risk is taken on by the program. Everyone's worried about their team and what if all these guys transfer out and we can't replace them. And I understand in the immediacy, yes, that wouldn't be good if Arkansas had 15 kids walk out the door. And I'm going to address that in a second, because it is a problem, and it is actually the portion of this whole deal that I think the NCAA may need to take action on. But Arkansas is going to field a team this fall. You walk out the door having been a part of the University of Arkansas football team, and you've been there 2 years, and let's say you got 2 years remaining, and you enter the transfer portal because you were running with the 2s at outside linebacker at Arkansas spring practice, you may get swallowed up by that portal. You may land somewhere, or you may get swallowed up, but I'm telling you, and more you're going to realize this, there's infinitely more risk taken on by the individual player entering the portal than there ever will be absorbed by the program from losing a player to the portal. But that I've talked about already. The second part of this is I do not believe that the NCAA needs to step in overall. I believe there's one area the NCAA needs to address that's been very short-sighted so far in nature, and I'm going to get to it. But a lot of your proposals right now are basically this. There are a lot of kids in the transfer portal. They're idiots. They don't know what they're doing. Or maybe they're not idiots, but they shouldn't just be able to walk out when the going gets tough. And so I don't like this, and so they need to put a stop to this. Well, number one, I don't know how in the world you think that would work. But number two, even if there were just a magic break glass here and press button in case of emergency scenario that they had, I don't think they should press it. That's that whole training wheel society that I'm not really a huge fan of, and it's on display right now. It's kind of like I used to tell you all the time, watching the baby bird hatch, and you constantly, if you got the wrong person watching the baby bird hatch, they feel like they need to reach in and peel the shell away. Baby birds have been coming out of eggs for long before you've been around, and they've come out just fine. And if they didn't, survival of the fittest, nature can be cruel. Most of the time, fortunately, you don't have to observe it. But it works if you'll just leave it alone. It could be ugly. It could be really, really nasty, but it ends up working out. And that bald eagle that you see when you go on your camping trip, at one point, it was just a little bird trying to push its way out of the egg. Now, how does that possibly apply to a linebacker thinking about whether or not he should leave New Mexico State? Well, here's what I mean. It's going to be ugly. I'm not telling you it's not going to be. But what I am confident in is that eventually this will correct itself if you'll just keep your hands off of it. In the interim, again, let me reiterate, it's going to be ugly. There is a lot of pushback that I get when I suggest this. I've done a lot of radio hits on this, and a lot of the pushback is, well, what about a guy's career? It could be ruined if he goes into the portal and there's nowhere to land for him. And you're right. There are going to be some careers that are ruined. There are going to be some opportunities of a lifetime that are flushed down the toilet because guys make poor decisions. Then I get the pushback, what if the guy's getting bad advice? It's going to happen. It's happening right now. By the dozens, by the hundreds, guys are getting horrible advice. And they're listening to it from people who have never done anything worthwhile in their life. And because they haven't, then they're trying to project their failure on you, and you're their ticket out. And so if you're not playing right now, you need to be over here where you can play. It's happening. It's going to happen. It's going to be terrible. It is what it is. The third piece of feedback that I get and really pushback a lot of times is, what about high school players that are being passed over by schools that are looking to fill their roster gaps via the transfer portal. It's a problem. I don't think it's going to be a long-term problem. That's happening right now, and it's not going to be as big a problem, I think, 5 years down the road because of number 4. And that is college programs, in some cases, not just the player, the program is about to learn the hard way how math works. Because a lot of them out there don't seem to understand it at the moment, and maybe you don't understand it, but that's okay, because you work 9 to 5 as an accountant and you have a normal life. You're not a head football coach. You're not in the executive department that's responsible for roster management for LSU or for Oklahoma, fill in the blank. I'm not singling out those programs. I'm just mentioning the fact that there is something going on right now that you're about to see a tidal wave of negative feedback from. Let me ask you, how do you think it works? How do you when you lose a guy, let's say you're Tennessee, and a guy walks out the door right now. Let's say you got 75 kids on scholarship, and you're about to have a class walk out the door, so however many go to the draft or graduate, all that's about to be accounted for too. But let's say you got 75. That means you're already 10 below the threshold. 85 is the max. So you got 75. You already got a little bit of a number situation on your hands. Let's say, even on top of all the kids you're going to lose in any given year, let's say 5 of them choose to transfer. In reality, the situation's worse at Tennessee, but let's say you have 5 of them that transfer out. You just went from 75 to 70, okay? Now you may think to yourself, all right, well, let's just go into the transfer portal ourselves, and then we'll pull 5 out of the transfer portal to fill that spot. Then our next recruiting class of 25 kids will come in, and we'll be good, right? It would be good if that were right, but that's not right, because that's not the way the math works. You see, here's the dirty secret that a lot of programs are starting to realize and starting to do the math on and go, whoa, we're about to dig ourselves into a real deep hole. When those kids leave your program, you don't get an extra scholarship in next year's recruiting class. So when Tennessee has 5 walk out the door, the number of kids you can take doesn't go from 25 to 30. And that'd be great. Then we wouldn't have a numbers crunch on our hands. No, it stays at 25. Here's where it gets even more complex. When those 5 walk out the door, every transfer that you take to fill those spots counts towards your 25 cap for this year. You can only bring 25 of them in. So if I have 5 kids transfer from Pate State and I bring 5 transfers in, that's wonderful. I can only take another 20 combined. Recruiting, transfers, they all count towards that same 25 number. And quickly, you see how that law of diminishing returns really starts to enter the equation, because you say, it doesn't matter if we have kids leave via the portal, we'll just take them via the portal. That's great. They're going to count. They're going to count against that 25 number. And so here's what's happening. What's happening is you've got the penny wise, pound foolish approach by some programs right now of putting basically the lawnmower over the weed. You got kids walking out via the portal, we'll take them via the portal, but then they wonder, wait a second, where in the world did all of our scholarships go? How come I'm not being able to take a full class? You can't, because you already took kids. And this is the huge loophole that I think maybe the NCAA needs to address. I was talking to someone in a very prominent athletic department about this the other day, and they were talking about the players being very foolish and not understanding right now. When you go in the portal, let's say you got 2 years left to play. What do you think a college staff is going to do? Long term now, right? In the immediacy, it's a problem. But long term, here's what players are going to find. If I go in the portal, and let's say I'm a linebacker, I'm pretty good. I just can't start where I was, but I'm pretty good. I go in the transfer portal. I got 2 years left to play, and I'm hoping that a program out there will take me. Well, let's say that staff that's thinking about taking me has another high school prospect that they roughly evaluate as equal to me. Which one do you think they're taking? The one that can give them 2 years and count against their 25? Or the one that could give them 4 years and count against their 25. That, long term, is what college staffs are going to revert to, because they don't want to dig themselves into the numbers peril that a lot of programs are right now. So here's what's going to happen. There are going to be even less and less opportunities for landing spots than there are now. There already aren't enough landing spots for kids in the portal. There will be even less in the future, because staffs will start to become wise to how math actually works. And so here's where I think it corrects itself. First off, that happens. Secondly, even as it is now, a lot of kids are going to crash and burn in the portal and never be heard from again. But here's the critical third part. High school coaches, high school parents, and responsible college staffs, you have to make sure that high school kids are observing this. The only way it corrects itself is if they observe it. One of my favorite Tracy Lawrence songs is Lessons Learned, and they sure run deep, they don't go away, and they don't come cheap. That's the way it's got to work here. And if you will observe, You don't have to learn every lesson the hard way. You can let some kids before you learn it the hard way. And then when you're sitting there and you're sitting up late at night staring at the ceiling in your dorm and practice has gone terrible and you're not where you want to be on the depth chart, it could be those lessons that other people learned that you observed that keep you on campus. And then you find out a year and a half later it's the best decision you ever made. I'm not anti-transfer, but please do it for the right reasons. And please have things thought through and don't let it be your plan B. Transferring needs to be about plan E or plan F on the list, and there are other ways to go about it, is what I'm saying. So lessons are being learned from kids, and lessons are being learned from college staffs, the like.